Hello, welcome to Colonel Truth's Miniature Issues. In this episode, we're moving away from the caves beneath Undercrag and onto the Undergate, a fortress inside the mountain. I'll be showing you how I constructed this, the various techniques and materials used, how I added small statues, stained glass, a cave roof, and lighting. It starts with a simple piece of black 5mm foam board. I'm focusing at first on the courtyard I want to build to the left of where the aqueduct flows from inside the mountain to outside. I'm going to have some neat paving and a series of steps because that's more interesting than just a flat area. This is pretty simple to begin with. I sketch out more or less what I want, and I use two identical size pieces to build up the 3D structure. The shaded area in the corner will be a rock structure to remind us that we're inside the mountain, and the straight line is the front wall of what will become the fortress. The curve is, of course, the steps. I'm sketching my steps in by hand. With the point of a brand new blade, nice and sharp, I cut through just the paper on top of the foam board so that I can peel it off. Cut again and slice out the first level of the steps. And again. Once that's done, I peel off the paper for the courtyard. And now the same for the base piece. And plenty of PVA to glue the two together nice and flat. Then it's time to draw in the stonework with an ordinary pencil. I want these stones to look irregular and worn and cracked, just like everything in Undercrag City. So there's no precise measuring, it's all done by eye. Then when I come to the top layer, it's a bit more special. The stonemasons have taken their time on the ground outside the fortress. That's already looking pretty good, and there's no paint on there. With the foundations down, I can start designing the fortress itself. I'm starting with the door. I want this to be quite a grand affair. I'm starting with just a concept sketch on the card that I'll be using. marking out some arches, getting it all straight in my head. These are some miniature knights. I'm going to use them as statues and arrange some archways for a couple of them to be emerging from the building. The reason I'm drawing on card like this is that at this stage I wasn't really sure how I was going to put this together, but I knew I wanted an ornate doorway. Once I got everything the way I wanted, I translated the drawings onto foam board. This is going to be my outer surface into which I can draw my stonework. The black card will sit behind this, so that I can add details a little at a time. I've cut out the doorway, spaces for the windows and arches, and another arch which will sit over the aqueduct. Now I'm going to remove the paper from any areas that will have stonework in the same way as I did for the pavement below. I've cut out a section of the building that I'm going to put back in again further forward. I want to create different layers to this and make it a more interesting structure. And I continue to build up the structure. I've added yellow foam strips for buttresses and a piece of castle wall left over from the very first episode almost a year ago. It was just sitting in my scrap box. And here's the arch that sits over the aqueduct. You can see how I've gradually built up the doorway from different layers of card, each cut into a different architectural shape, with a balsa wood door at the back. This just makes it much more interesting. There's a big space at the top of the building, and my stained glass window is going to sit in front of this. I've also deliberately left some gaps that you might notice between the different levels. This is in the hope that light will spill down the front of the building from inside when I install the LEDs. Now I'm adding a shelf that the statues will stand on. One knight in each alcove, and another in the middle. These, by the way, are from Callistra miniatures. Now to make the shelf more interesting and give it some support. I'm cutting small rectangles of card and gluing them underneath each other. Each one sits slightly further back and is slightly smaller than the one above it. Here I'm going back to a technique I've been using since the very beginning of the Undercrag project. I've drawn my archways on some paper and added details from thin card. These are glued over the rectangles that I cut. I'm approaching the stained glass window in the same way, with an elaborate circular design. And a coat of arms above the door. I want to add paving to the shelf where the statues will stand, but I want to keep its depth to a minimum, so I'm using paper instead of card. And now that all the details are in place, it's time to hand draw the stonework again. There are quite a few cracks and chinks in these stones. They've seen a lot of years. And continuing round. Now I'm patching up some gaps. PVA and a little bit of sand. This will double as moss, just like on the castle walls outside Undercrag. When the PVA is dry, it's time to start painting. Everything gets a dark grey base coat. And here's how it looks sitting against the aqueduct. Now the model's had some highlighting with light grey and white, and I'm working on the door. This is the same technique I've used on the woodwork elsewhere in the city. And the statues, same grey as the stone, with touches of gold, burnished with a brown wash. And the coat of arms. a black wash over all of the grey. Now green, and then yellow, everywhere that I've got moss. The green is very vivid, but the yellow washes it out and adds lots of different tones. Thin black card makes the hardware for the door. Just simple strips. Touch of silver paint. Topped off with a little bit of rust ink. Now I've decided I didn't add enough detail to the door, so I'm adding some extra stonework in. I'm painting in the lines between stones, and I'll go over these with a black pen. Which should give a reasonable impression of stone, without standing out too much. I think that looks much better. Time for the glass. I prepared this sheet of acetate with Mod Podge on both sides a long time ago, and I've been cutting all of my windows out of it a little at a time. I'm designing a stained glass window with a shield at the centre to show the heraldry of Undercrag City. I'm going to trace this through onto the acetate sheet. The circles are drawn precisely with a stencil, but everything else is done by hand. Leaded glass tends to be a little bit wonky. Now I'm adding coloured ink to the panels. Light blue in the sky, dark blue for rivers, green for the ground, and yellow and grey for stone. While the stained glass is drying, I'm going to start building up the cave roof. Chunks and offcuts of 5mm foam board. And a rocky column in the corner that I left earlier on. This is intended to remind the viewer that the undergate is inside a cave. With the column in place, I can put a proper roof piece in. Looks like I've added too much PVA in a couple of places. That'll clean up. A little more work on the stained glass window. Black ink over the outlines. And moving on with the structure. there needs to be a cave mouth opening into the outside world. Now more work on the roof. I'm adding more and more layers of black foam board to build up something resembling an irregular, rocky structure. I'll work over this with clay shortly. I've decided to add a path from the cave mouth over the aqueduct and down to the paved area. I'm cutting this from a single piece of foam. I'm adding steps. It's a reasonable fit, but it's not quite right, so I have to keep adding little bits. It's fallen apart a little, but it'll all go back together. Back to the stained glass. I've cut it out. Now with a bead of PVA around it, I'm fitting it into the frame. Looks pretty good. And I can start adding my lighting. I'm constructing a simple circuit of just a few flickering yellow LEDs to put light through the various windows and spaces. Happy with that? Time to move back to the roof. With a project like this, there's so much going on, you can leave one bit to dry while you move on to the next, so it doesn't take as long as you might think. This whole section of Undercrag City from start to finish was about 12 hours. Mrs. O'Truth had great fun editing it all down into a single video. Now the cave roof and other rocky structures have been built up with DAS clay and PVA glue. I've also cut a great big gap out of my rock column. I think it tells the story without getting in the way now. When the clay and PVA are dry, same grey as everywhere else. The same highlighting. And ink washes. If you're familiar with Undercrag City, you'll have seen this technique a number of times. On with the yellow and the green. Now my pearlescent washes, pink and a blue. These add interesting mineral veins over the grey. Time to think about fitting this in. I need to start by adding some texture to the back of this cave wall, because you can see along the aqueduct to this archway. It's got to blend in with what's in front of it. Doesn't need much work, and then I can glue the structure into place. I've soldered the circuit into the rest of the city, and it works nicely. So I just have to blend it into the rest of the model now. More clay where the joins are. More grey paint, working over some of what I'd done before, but it'll all blend together. Down below you can see the balcony and jetty from the previous episode. So there we are, the Undergate. Please remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Maybe give me some shares and some likes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.